Welcome to the literal After Dark vlog where it's literally dark in the room where I'm vlogging. Today I'm talking about how all my friends seem to have pretty strange political beliefs, pretty out of the ordinary philosophical perspectives, and not just out of the ordinary but also contradicting with both me and each other, because I also have strange philosophical and political perspectives on pretty much everything. Uh, but yeah, why and how? You know, generally, it's people seem surprised by this because they don't expect someone who's the right sees me as a lefty, because they don't know they don't know what the difference between left and post left is. So the right sees me as a lefty, and they're like, well, why? They're not used to lefties being friends with people who are lean more towards the right. And I mean, the reason for that is that I believe, okay, I might be wrong, but I believe it was Mark Fisher who said something along the lines of that the left-right political dichotomy is kind of outdated and we should focus more on upwing and downwing. I believe it was Mark Fisher. I might be wrong. I will correct it in the description of this video if I am wrong. But yeah, I might just be completely wrong about that. But something like that, the upwing and downwing, basically acceleration or deceleration is far more important in the modern world than left or right, because the things that left and right really argue for are kind of just semantics at this point, whereas acceleration or deceleration is far more impactful on most people's daily lives. And in general, almost everyone I'm friends with is in some way accelerationist. Not literally accelerationist in like the Nick Land way, but like technologically towards progress, aside from like maybe one or two anthems that I know and I'm friends with. But aside from them, generally everyone is upwing. So there's the consistency. Left and right don't really matter in this situation because we're all aiming for either way we all end up in the same place, in my view anyway. Since I don't believe that communism, a communist revolution is ever going to happen, that essentially means that I can side with a communist as much as I can side with a libertarian. They're all aiming for the same place. Now, that doesn't mean that I agree with everyone's beliefs there. I am neither a communist nor a libertarian. I don't agree with. I can hate both of these political opinions, but not hate the person attached to them. Because I mean, really, what influences friendship far, far more than political opinions for me is like something like music taste. I've never met someone with bad music taste who I've then gone on to find as an interesting person, whereas I've met many, many people online and in real life with horrible, stupid political opinions. None, to be honest, most of the people with like extremely stupid political opinions tend to be extremely stupid people, but uh, I've met some people with really wacky political opinions who turn out to be really interesting people who are pretty smart, you know? Whereas music, never met a single person who's into bad, shitty, who like only listens to trashy music and then somehow turned out to be a cool person. That doesn't exist because art is much more of a reflection of people's personalities than politics is. Politics is it's sort of a random choice. It's much closer to religion in the sense that it's like it's incredibly influenced by environment in most cases. Like which path you end up going down is it's pretty much just pure luck. It's like that in that little anime that like anime trope where they play that game where they draw a bunch of shit on a piece of paper like ladders and then they trace down the ladders to find a random exit. That's kind of what finding your political thoughts are like. It's very heavily dependent on where you grow up, who you hang out with, how you were brought up, how you were raised, with your political, your socioeconomic status, the political state in your country right then, where on the internet you hang out, all this sort of shit, like heavily affects your political views. And it can affect. Obviously, that sort of thing would probably affect your music taste as well. But in, I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to put that bit into words. But what I'm trying to say is that the value of having, like, being willing to openly express strange against the grain political views is what makes someone interesting. Those actual views that they're expressing is pretty inconsequential compared to the fact that they are willing to express those ideas when it comes to affecting their personality. Of course, something like the philosophy you live your life by, pretty important thing, especially for you as like the person who's living that life, pretty important. But in terms of building a friendship, something like politics is relatively unimportant unless it's something personal. For example, I don't have any friends, not that I know of anyway, who are what's the word? I don't not TERFs, but like don't acknowledge trans people, because I am, here we go. This is essentially me, quote unquote, coming out. I am. I call myself. I guess I'm non-binary. Uh, I definitely thought about gender stuff quite a lot, and come to the conclusion that uh, it's too complicated. It needs its own video, but whatever you want to call me, I don't really have a name for it either. But no one that I am friends with is explicitly against that sort of thing, because that would be a personal, that way we would be physically incompatible on a personality level, right? But in general, I can be just as close friends with, literally, I mean, one of my closest internet friends is a hardcore libertarian who I disagree with on like so many things, but we completely agree on gun rights. So, and we have similar views on government, not the same views, but we have similar views that government should, I just think we should get rid of them entirely. He thinks that you should make them smaller. We can kind of get along with that. Generally, I can find common ground with most people. But then I have other friends, one of my friends is a leftcom. I don't even know what a leftcom is really, but he's a nice guy. We don't even talk about politics much, but there you go. I've got a friend who's a primitivist. Now that's probably the biggest political difference because, well, but still we find common ground on. We both think that uh, we both agree with a lot of stuff of each other. Pretty much we disagree with one incredibly major thing, which is acceleration versus deceleration, which is like semantics. You're arguing semantics at that point. That could also be its own video, but like we both agree with anti-civilization, both agree with anarchy in general as a sort of process, and political unrest, political and social unrest, not necessarily targeted political and social unrest, just sort of a generalized, more insurrectionary form as being a net positive. All this sort of stuff we generally agree on. We just disagree on the sort of semantics of the end goal of what this sort of thing should achieve. With the emancipatory potential of technology is essentially what we disagree with, which, and that's about, and if that's the biggest political difference I have with someone, then that's pretty crazy. That's still tiny. In general, I disagree with everyone. I've never met a single person who shares my political views. Even the people who are like closest to sharing my political views, I've never actually talked to them. I've just seen them around on the internet, on Twitter. You got like, there's a few Twitter accounts that I follow that I'm like, yeah, this person has pretty good opinions in general. Never found someone who I 100% agree with yet. Could happen, but not so far. But there's a few that come close, but never talk to these people. That's not interesting. Why would I want to talk to someone who shares everything in common with me? The thing that makes it interesting is the differences. That's the point of a friendship. My best friend in real life, we've never even really talked politics. I mean, we've had some discussions that verge on the political, but we've never I literally don't even know if he has political views or what his political views are. I've never even asked him. It's never come up. sometimes we may talk, like I remember at one point we were talking about Jordan Peterson, and he was like, because I think I mentioned at one point that I don't like Jordan Peterson, as obvious, it should be obvious, and he must have, because I know that he likes Joe Rogan, because I don't know if he likes Joe Rogan, but he saw some Joe Rogan podcast, because my friend's very into psychedelics, and he saw some of the Joe Rogan podcast, and I guess he must have seen that Jordan Peterson was on it, and he asked me, so why don't you like Jordan Peterson? I then went on to explain, you know, the basic stuff about how he doesn't understand what postmodernism or Marxism is, and he's transphobic and all that shit. And he was like, oh, okay. And then we never mentioned it again. We never talked about it again. That's about as close as we've ever come to politics. Uh, it's just unimportant. What is important is I like to surround myself with as many varied personalities as possible. Even on Twitter, make a point to follow right-wing accounts, despite the fact that I disagree with literally everything they say, because that way I'm never in an echo box. I'm never, I mean, I was trying to say hug box and echo chamber at the same time. I'm never just surrounded by people parroting back the same views as me. I'm always constantly challenged, and it's slightly frustrating, yes, but it means I have to actually justify my views, and that's helpful for letting me grow. It's basically the reason that I stopped being like a straight lefty and became, more sort of lost. It's basically the reason I lost faith in like dialectical materialism and general lefty Hegelian sentiment of anarcho-syndicalism, which you may know I used to prescribe myself to, um, and became a little more of a sort of postmodern floating mass of nonsense. Uh, well, partly because I read more, and partly because I was surrounded by a lot of people who were either saying things should have been agreeing with me, but were saying things I didn't agree with, or were supposed to be against me, but they were saying things that I did agree with. People like and there were and then even then, after I sort of was more aware of the fact that I generally agree with a more nihilist, postmodern, egoist view, then I was as I was getting into that, like acclimatizing myself to that sort of group of person on the internet, that sort of the internet community that exists around those views. Well, who's the biggest people who seem to share these views? Well, all these egoists on Twitter. Generally, I disagree with them. Not always. There's some that I like. There's a guy who's, I believe his handle is at Anarchy is me, and he's pretty cool. There's one. That's just a random example. Generally agree with that guy. But then there's, the first one I found was Dr. Bones, and straight away I disagreed with him on like everything. I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? How can you be an egoist communist? Those things don't match up. And whoa, what a surprise, he turned out to be a total bastard. What a surprise. As soon as I found out that he'd like, oh, I don't want to get into Dr. Bones' discussion. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that you can still be friends with someone even if their political beliefs are different from yours, as long as their political beliefs don't directly affect you. Like, as long as they're if you're black, very difficult for you to be friends with an over anti-black racist guy, right? If you're Jewish, very difficult for you to be friends with a Nazi. If you're trans, very difficult for you to be friends with a TERF. All this shit, but it makes sense. If you're gay, very difficult to be friends with someone who's like a devout Christian. Not easy. That sort of thing, difficult. However, I bet if you could be friends with that person, if you could make it work, that would be an incredibly valuable experience to learn about someone with such different views from yourself. You would probably both grow so much as people that by the end of it, you'd look completely different. And kind of that's what I want out of friendships. That's kind of the most important thing. Is that you improve yourself, you both improve each other just by being in each other's presence. I feel like that's the ideal form of relationship, friendship, romantic, any whatever. If you should just by being in the vicinity of each other should make each other better people. And The way to grow is not by being surrounded by people who agree with you, it's by being surrounded by people who don't agree with you and make you think about yourself. Critical self-theory is far more important than any, outside prescriptive theory. I'm not the sort I'm not going to go around pulling a digibro and telling people that books are stupid and you shouldn't have to read books to tell you how you think. That shit's dumb as fuck. But in a sense, there is one correct aspect to it, which is that you should always be critical of everything. I mean, I know this is incredibly basic stuff and most people have this down, but I still find examples of it being misused, especially I know, I don't want to keep having a go at the Marxists. I should criticize the right more, but it's just that everyone already has criticized the right, and it's so easy. I feel like my job's cut out. I don't even need to because everyone's already done it better than I could. Like, but I find Marxists. They tend to do things like quote Marx, and the fact that it's Marx saying it means it's true to them, rather than thinking constantly critical, that sort of thing. I don't want to start any arguments. Please don't want to start any arguments again. We can all be friends. I'm not trying to pick on any individual political idea or whatever. What I'm particularly trying to say is just using that as an example that everyone should always be critical of everything they read, and the ideological supermarket, just like any other supermarket, is fit only for looting. Just just take what you want and give nothing back because they're just ideas and that's what they're for. You should read as much as you can and you should take what you like and throw away what you don't like. For a long time I called myself an egoist anarchist. I don't really go by that label anymore, but some people like to call me one of those, and the only reason for that is that I took what I liked from reading The Ego on its own. But there's a lot of shit in that book that I don't like. The entire first chapter, for example, I think is complete bullshit, and I'm pretty sure is just like not even true. I think he just made it up. I'm pretty sure most people would agree with me. Um, so that sort of thing. There's a bunch of shit like that. I call myself an accelerationist, right? But I don't really like Nick Land that much. I mean, do I even call myself an accelerationist? Not really, but I do take some ideas from accelerationism. Again, the point of this video is just to say that you should surround yourself with a diverse and interesting group of friends, and not with a samey group of friends who will just confirm your beliefs, because that just makes you a boring person. To become an interesting and well-rounded person, you should be surrounded by a group of interesting and well-rounded friends. That's pretty much the most important thing that you can do to self-improve. More important than reading loads of books, more important than exposing yourself to loads of culture, is surrounding yourself with interesting and diverse people, and not just diverse of ideas. More important than diverse of ideas and diverse of culture, I'd say, is probably the most important thing you can do to build a more critical worldview. And you should always look at everything with a critical self-theory kind of eye. That is my preachiness for today. I feel like if you live your life by those rules, you will just constantly grow as a person. There's no way to live your life that way and be boring. And in my eyes, boring people are the worst kind of people, and you should do everything, I should do everything in my power to avoid becoming a boring person. If you want to become a boring person, chances are you already are one. So, please feel free to ignore my advice. I'm just trying to help out here. Is this video gone for 20 minutes? Holy shit. Almost 20 minutes? That's crazy. What was I even talking about for this whole time? Anyway, yeah, at risk of sounding like a hippie, friends are very important and you should be nice to your friends. I really don't want to feel like this is incredibly hippie-ish for me to say, but yeah. If you have good friends, you will be a better person and you will make them better people in return. That's how friendship should work, in my eyes. All opinions. These are all opinions. Yeah. Whew, man. Fucking Digi, what have you done? I haven't even seen your video, but you've just fucked up everything for everyone. Everyone's just gone nuts over this video that I don't even want to watch anymore. God, you're insane. You're a madman. Stop.